Hi Mark, how you doing?
I'm good, yeah, you alright?
Good. We're here at the National Franchise Exhibition at NEC. We thought we'd just do a chat around a bit of a franchise recruitment update. How franchise recruitment's looking in 2024, how it's looking now we're in October 2024. And obviously when you're at a franchise show, it feels like it's a good indication of interest in franchising in general.
Yeah.
And what's your perception of the show so far? We're kind of at 3 p.m-ish on day one.
Yeah, it's gone quick. It's gone busy. It's been busy, I think. Like, there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of buzz around it. But it's hard to judge, like, between other exhibitions, I think. Don't you think?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's been good, actually. I get the sense there's a lot of people walking around, a lot of... I kind of like speaking to people that are here as visitors to understand why they're here and what they're looking at. I think shows have definitely turned into a... People aren't here to discover franchising. People are here because they have already discovered franchising and they're coming here very specifically to talk to a brand or a couple of brands from a sector.
Yeah.
And that's the impression I get. Like, I've spoken to a few people. There was one guy I spoke to who's very much here. You can tell he's been exploring F&B franchises for a long time, really knew his stuff about franchising, was here specifically to meet a couple of brands. There was another person I spoke to who's here, has a really strong interest in home care and wanted to speak to a few home care brands. So I think with shows now, it's not a pure reflection of the overall interest in franchising, because I think there's plenty of people looking at franchising that wouldn't necessarily come to the show, but it shows you how many people are a bit further along in the journey, I think.
Yeah. I think from talking to people like Ryan before, like, about like the people that come up to him at shows, like, he wants them to know already who he is, because he's putting stuff out on social media where people will feel like they know him just purely by watching his content all the time. So I think if you're doing that and if you're following up well afterwards, that's always going to mean like these shows work better for you. Whereas like you see some people where like they all day no one really comes to see them, and then they've spent a load of money and not done the work beforehand and not done the work afterwards to make it work. To
follow them up, yeah. But it does. I think it feels like a positive day, and I think it's kind of reflective. I think I think franchise recruitment in 2024 in general across the sector has been tough.
Yeah.
And I think it's been tough for a good few years. I think most franchisors would say it has been tough. I think there's exceptions to that, which we can chat about, but I think but my sense is that every year that passes since the pandemic, it rises slightly. And I'm not saying there's been like a massive shift in interest but it feels to me like the shows are getting busier, and I think the pandemic probably did wipe that away a little bit. I think the shows are getting busier. I think traffic, I was looking at traffic the other day around franchise-related search terms. I think that is gradually increasing again since the pandemic. So my kind of sense is at the moment that interest is growing in franchising, which is great. That's what we all want to hear. I think the issue that's still around a little bit is the kind of decision paralysis. I think there is interest, and there's lots of people here at the show, but how close they are to making a decision and finally leaving their job, investing, that's the part, and I think that's the issue with the uncertainty that's around. We're still living in kind of a time when it seems like every week there's a different uncertainty around.
Yeah, like you always say, like there needs to be a time of certainty, and like over the last like 6 or 7 years, you've always said like we're just waiting for Brexit to be over, then we're waiting for COVID to be over, and then we're waiting for like the general election, and it's just sort of like what's going to happen next. Trying to think about
it's just a constant. I think you even need uncertainty to be over, so people are a bit more certain, so they can make the decisions. I think every brand, without knowing it, probably has 2 or 3 franchisees that may or may not be in contact but are ready to go. They're going to invest, but they're just waiting for that perfect moment, and they might be waiting for that little bit more certainty to make the leap. So I think we even need more of a certain time, and in the modern world I don't know if that's possible.
I thought of 2 other things that happen, like your war in Ukraine, cost of living as well.
And now other conflicts going on, or we need a bit more certain uncertainty, which I know sounds really random, but like for years we feel like we're going to go into some sort of recession, or I suppose we have been in and out of recessions, but more of a kind of economic decline. I think if that happened and there was a deeper recession, I don't think we're naturally wanting that to happen, obviously, but that would give a bit more certainty to the uncertainness, and I think that would help franchising. But I think we're in this kind of limbo period where, for, like you say, for 5, 6, 7 years, there's always been something which is stopping people making decisions. They'll be like, well, I'm going to wait to see how that plays out. I'm going to wait. There's now a new government. I'm going to wait to see how that plays out in the economy over the next year. And unfortunately, for the vast majority of franchise opportunities, that probably sit in the middle of the investment level. I think at lower cost franchise opportunities are less affected by that because maybe the decision's not quite as big. And at the higher end, I don't think it's such a big thing because there's lots of multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees that, if anything, are growing at the moment. But everyone that sits in the middle, I think that uncertainty is just creating a, decision paralysis, if you like.
Yeah. You mentioned as well that there's certain brands or certain sectors that are doing all right out of the uncertainty. Which ones are those?
I think there's certain brands that are slightly more immune to it. I think the home care sector over the last, as an example, over the last 5 to 10 years, still has an incredible amount of people wanting to get into that sector. Clearly, it's a growing sector. People are confident.
New brands come along in the last
lots
few
of
years,
new brands, and I think there's more certainty that that's a sector which is only going to grow over time. So that kind of stands alone a little bit. I think the real growth in franchising, certainly since the pandemic and maybe even a bit before, is multi-unit, multi-brand. And I think if you're a franchisor that would want to attract multi-brand, multi-unit franchisees, then that's where the opportunity lies. If your opportunity is much more of you want a single unit owner-operator that needs to be working in the business day in, day out, and you don't really want them going off owning lots of other businesses, then it probably doesn't work. But the BFA, and I probably should know a bit more about this date, but they released their latest kind of research report this morning about their kind of recruitment into franchising. And one of the stats which I've heard someone talk about, so this won't be completely accurate, but since the report was last done 5-6 years ago, the average number of units per multi-unit franchisee, so someone that owns more than one location, has gone from 2 point something to 11 point something.
Wow.
Now that's a massive jump, and that's where the growth in franchising is. We've now got so many serious players in the UK who have gone. They own multiple brands. They're opening multiple units, and that's the real growth.
Why are they doing that? Why are they buying multiple brands, multiple units?
Well, I think it started in F&B. Probably is where that came in. So, in the Subways and the KFCs and those kind of brands, it lends itself to opening 5, 10 of them in a region, and the economies of scale that will come to that. And that's the model of the F&B brands. They want people to go and open multiple brands. They're not really after single unit operators. The model doesn't work like that. And I think what's happened over time is that's grown, and you've got some huge franchisees that own 100, 200 locations and multiple brands. I think probably what the pandemic did was scare those guys a little bit, because they are so heavily invested into one sector, and when they had to close their doors during the pandemic, they suddenly thought, well, we need to diversify a little bit here, maybe out of F&B. In fact, in the end, F&B probably done very well through the pandemic because of deliveries and all those kind of things. So I think what a lot of those guys did post-pandemic was like, well, actually, we know franchising, we know how to operate within a brand, we know how to be successful franchisees. What other sectors can we now go and find to invest in? And you'll find a lot of the gyms, gym franchises have lots of multi-brand, multi-unit franchisees. And lots of other ones, I think, are now starting to gain those kind of people. So if it doesn't work for every franchise. Not every franchise wants someone to come in and open 6 territories and maybe not be involved day to day and have a management team in. It just doesn't work for everybody. But if it does work for your opportunity, that's where the growth is. And over the next 5 years, we talk about the conditions being hard. Well, that's just a whole different market where you can open it up and go.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. So do you see it recovering for everyone else, or just see it being?
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of.
You've been predicting this for years, and it's not quite.
Yeah,
happened,
like I kind of feel like we always think that it's going to improve. People are still recruiting franchisees. Franchisors are still growing, but probably, not in the same way as they were pre-pandemic. And it is just tougher. there's a lot more competition now. Like the other thing since the pandemic, there are a lot more franchisors. Like you come to these shows now and you probably see 10 to 20 brands which you haven't really seen much of or seen before. Again, pre-pandemic, I'm not sure that was always the case. Like I think you saw the same brands all the time. So there is more competition. And it's just a little bit harder to recruit. But plenty of brands are recruiting. It probably sounds like doom and gloom. I don't think it's totally doom and gloom, but I think it is just hard.
Yeah, I just think people appreciate you being honest about it. And I think that's what's important. Like, you've done that in Whiteboard Weekly for the last, however many years.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Well, every prediction, I think, probably on Whiteboard Weekly was like, wow, what we think is coming is, once this is, over, Brexit, we're going to be okay. That happened, and then all of a sudden, there's a pandemic. And that's been the hard part of it, really. But I think it will. I think there'll be a time when... I actually think another interesting part of it, and I think we could probably all think of these kind of situations, but the pandemic actually led to people being a bit more comfortable at work in their employment. Lots of people that maybe used to commute to London every day now work from home 4 days a week, and they might have been given pay rises during the pandemic and actually sit at home now working from home and quite happy with their work-life balance, which suddenly is much better than it was 5-6 years ago. So that motivation to leap out of employment into self-employment business ownership hasn't helped. So, I think if the whole of the country was told that they're now going back to work in the office every day, there would be 5 times more people in this franchise show thinking, well, I'm not going to commute to London all the time. So that I don't think that's helped franchising, really.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah, I do. I've got friends who probably were looking to leave the job they're in or change jobs pre-pandemic, then suddenly now they're working from home the majority of the time, on a good salary, jobs are secure, job market's really secure, and that motivation's just gone a little bit. And we know that people get into franchising because they're trying to move away from a pain, and the pain's not big enough at the moment to be driving that. So I do think that's part of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, we'll see how the rest of the day goes.
Is there anything else you want to add before we go?
No. Yourself?
That was good. No, that was good.
Good.
Cheers.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.